And welcome back. Let's go ahead and jump right into looking at an example of how to write our own function using Python. Let's go ahead and do a simple example here, which if you look at our print statement, it might give you a hint of what we're going to go ahead and create today, which is creating a function that average any size group of numbers. Now, of course, we could use like things like lists and stuff like that for this, but we haven't yet talked about lists, and this can actually be handled with a simple loop that we can use to kind of test things out. Now, of course, it's not going to be a perfect thing because we are going to have to use set no values to kind of iterate through this till we find that's one of those set no values. So it's not a perfect thing, but we're just going to go ahead and assume that this is going to be what we want. So let's just go ahead and take a group of numbers here. And the way we can handle this is to create a function that's going to average those numbers up. So how does an average work? Well, if you remember, an average really kind of has two components, right? It's going to take numbers and add them back into a sum, into a total. And then it's going to take that total, and then it's going to then take those pieces and divide it by how many ever we have. So let's go ahead and just create a function, and let's just call this averager, and that will be the name of our function. And you notice right now we don't have that function defined, so we need to go ahead and define that function. Now, I could, of course, say, maybe we have a set number of values. If, for example, we knew how many numbers we were passing in, then let's say we had a parameter that says, like, number of values, and that could be a limiting scope. And we could say we're going to take in 5 numbers and find the value. In fact, we can do multiple versions of this. Let's go ahead and do this one first, because it's going to make it easier for us to go ahead and think about how we can do this with a infinite scope. So if we have a set number of values, let's say we have 5. Well, that means we're going to have a loop. And let's just use our good old while loop. And let's just say while number of values, in fact, actually, before we get to number of values, we need a kind of a iterator value. So let's just say count is equal to 0. And we say while count is less than our number of values, we can then just go ahead and have it do what we want to do. Which, if you think about this, we have to enter in a number to be averaged. So let's go ahead and say, let's get a number value. So we'll just say number is equal to int. Or we could even do a float here if we want, so we can do decimals. So float of input. And let's just have a prompt so the user knows what they're doing. So enter a number to be averaged. And then what we need to do is we have to store that back into something to add it up, right? Now that means I need another variable. So we have count as 0 here. And so we, of course, can add in another variable. I'm just going to go ahead and have this one be total. And we'll initialize that as well to 0. So then we're going to go ahead and say that total is equal to total plus number. Okay, and we're going to just let that run through that iteration. And then when that's done, we need to effectively just take whatever this total that we have here. So we'll take the total, and we want to divide that out by our count. Now, if we just leave this as if we say total divided by count, that's technically correct, but we need something to do with it, right? So we're, for example, we're going to want to return that value so then we can use it. So averager is going to be called, it's going to be returned. Now we could just have it instead, just say print, for example, print, and we just say total divided by count. And that would, of course, just print that out for me. In fact, let's just go ahead and test this out right now just to see where our function's at. And we get an invalid syntax. Oh, it's because if you look, it doesn't know what this comma is here. So let's just be easy and make our total on the next line. It says missing one value, number of values. Oh, because if you look at our function, what did we forget to do? We forgot to define that we want this to have 5 arguments. There we go. So creating a function that will average any size group number, enter a number to be average. So let's go ahead and put in, really easy, we'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, now notice it is asking for one more, and it's still going because what did we forget to do? This is a basic programming blunder, so let's just clear this out. We'll just terminate that completely. Clear the terminal. We forgot to do the classic blunder of incrementation. Now remember, we can't do plus plus, so we have to do plus equals 1. And that'll allow us to increase count. There we go. That should, of course, fix that. And so now we can go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go, and we get 3. That looks perfect because 3 would be the middle of those values. This is a great way for me to test this program because I know without having to do any complex math that this should be the middle value of that set of numbers. That I can do that. I also notice I'm getting those numbers smushed up, so I'm just going to add a space here. That'll make it so it looks a little visually nicer. Now, this, of course, is creating averager using this way. Now, can we create another averager program here? Like in Java, we can have other ones. So let's just go ahead and create this averager. All right, but let's try and do this one without having an argument. And let's go ahead and set this up in kind of the same way. In fact, we're going to copy this code here, paste it in. But let's say we don't know the number of values. All right, we don't know how many this is going to go to. So this one cannot be the count is less than the values. Let's say we wanted to go for until they enter a negative number. All right, so that means we can have it effectively keep running. So we can say, for example, while count is, let's say, greater than or equal to 0. So it should always be greater than or equal to 0 based upon how our program runs. Or what we want to do is to terminate at a point is if we kind of hit that point where it's no longer a good value. So let's just say, all right, enter a number to be average. We're going to say, hey, here's a number to be average. We're going to say if that number is, let's say, less than 0. So if the number is less than 0, let's just go ahead and break out of that loop. Easy way to do it is just a sentinel value that's going to have a number no longer be in here. So just to clarify this, we can say enter a non-negative number to be averaged. And we'll say enter a negative to stop. Okay? And now if we go ahead and look at this one, let's just put this in as is. We'll just call averager now without the parentheses. Let's see if we go ahead and can do this, or if Python's going to get angry because we have 2 averager functions now. So if we go ahead and run this, you notice now we have a error here. It's a syntax error. What did we forget? Oh, we forgot to include our colon here. So let's try this one more time. We'll clear out our terminal so we don't have to look at that. And now you can see we said avenger takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. All right, and that's because now there's 2 averager functions here. So this is something that Java has a strength over. We could, of course, have different parameters that we could define certain things for in our methods. But here we have a averager that's strictly saying, hey, you have 1 value, here you have no value. So let's just say this is averager no limit. We'll just call it that one. So let's call this averager no limit. Let's just change that. We run a program, and notice now it is ready to do those things. So we can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so there's our list there. Now this one says enter a negative stop. So let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to do negative 1. And we get 2.5, which, let's think about that. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4. That means the middle point of this should be 2.5, which, yes, that looks correct. Now, one thing you'll notice with each of these functions, though, that I've done, is that they're all using print statements. All right? None of them are using returns, which is fine if we want to give that value back. But what if I wanted to store it into a variable? Now, that would be something interesting. So, for example, let's say I have an int, or let's just say a number called average of some value, and we were going to use this, or we can call it average to be used. All right, we'll call that average to be used. And what we're using for it doesn't matter. But if I wanted that to equal this a certain value, so let's just say averager no limit. All right. The problem with this is if we try to run this one. All right, I'm just going to comment out these other 2 real quick, just so that way they're not here and we're not having to use them. We run this. All right, we can go ahead and enter the same numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then negative 1. All right, we get 2.5, but this variable, if I were to here and say print average to be used, just to print out that variable, the issue we're going to run into is that it says none. And that's because this function does not have a return statement. So if we wanted this to instead to return a value, we can add that return statement. I can rerun it, Oh, I went a little too fast there, I think, for my program. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and -1. Now we get 2.5. So how you want to use your function is ultimately going to determine, do you need to, for example, return a value, or can you just print out a value? You have to, as a programmer, make that determination. This, of course, should give us some good examples of how to use some of those. In fact, I'm just going to take this one right on out of here. I'll add this one back in just so we can have that. But this is, again, some good examples of how to use functions, both kind of with parameters, without parameters, and also just whether or not we need to use those return statements.